Three, two, one. Kyle Pitts is probably going to break the tight end rookie record, but has he lived up to the hype? That and more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co host, Chris Allen. Chris, Kyle Pitts has had a pretty solid rookie year, but has he lived up to the hype that we had preseason?
I think so. And I don't know, and we'll get into the conversation here in just a second, but I don't know if that's really the question we need to be asking ourselves right now. It's not necessarily has he lived to the hype, but has his value shifted enough from a market perspective that we should be looking at him any differently than we did preseason, right?
Right.
Because if we're not assuming he's going to be the tight end one, or even relative to the players he was drafted around, and we'll talk about this in a little bit too, because in rookie drafts, he was, let's say in Superflex, 105-ish, so around Najee Harris, Jamar Chase, and some single back leagues or single quarterback leagues, he was talked about being drafted at the 101 position. So somewhere like around like some of the same players that I just mentioned, but still, where like does he now fall below any of those guys? And if the answer is no, or if then now the answer would be that you would still take him ahead of some of the other guys, then we shouldn't really worry about how he ends the season, because from a perception case or from a perception perspective, and that's really how the market is going to view him over the offseason as the Falcons close out their football season, like not likely to make the playoffs, but it's still a chance. I think that's really the conversation that we're going to continue to have over the offseason about how we should value Kyle Pitts. And as of right now, no, I don't think his value really changes from a positional standpoint. He's over most of the other guys, like in a relative to his position. And then while I think the finer discussion comes into, I mean, should we value him more than Jamar Chase, Najee Harris? Okay, that requires more of a nuanced discussion, but I think he's done enough to keep him in that conversation from a, let's say, like across the board, like across all positions. So no, I think he has lived up to the hype, and I think his value will only start to increase as we get into the offseason.
So this has been such a difficult conversation to have because everyone falls on one side of the fence or the other. You either think that Kyle Pitts is the next coming of like Mike Ditka, since he's about to beat Mike Ditka's record, Tony Gonzalez, Rob Gronkowski, etc. Or
Yeah.
you think that his value is completely overblown. I'm not interested in either side. I'm focusing on what is the best thing to do in Dynasty right now with Kyle Pitts. I do not get enthralled in players. I don't get enthralled in the player debates, like who's in love with Kyle Pitts and just thinks that they're the next Kelsey, essentially, because he just overtook Kelsey. That doesn't really matter to me as much as what side of the fence is most people falling on, because that means that there might be an edge. Like you said, maybe his value can go up. Now, he's already tight end one without producing tight end one numbers. That's a area where you could look at maybe trying to profit on. If the chances of him being tight end one are probably better than anybody else in the league because of the fact that he's Kyle Pitts, but that doesn't mean that it's a guarantee, and that doesn't mean that you can't get insane profit margins on your investment already, because he is going to break Mike Ditka's rookie receiving record. Now, he only has one touchdown. There's probably going to be positive regression there. However, you can't really say that he's better off than any of the other guys. Like, if you could go through, just take a second and go through the top like 4 or 5 picks for me for a second, and then see where Pitts would have fallen for you.
Who else you got? So what's the list?
So it was, let's start at the top with Trevor Lawrence. Then you had Najee Harris. Then I had Justin Fields. Then you had Trey Lance. Then you had Jamar Chase. And then you had Kyle Pitts. So where's Kyle Pitts for you in that grouping right there?
So I think like for the quarterbacks, at least, like Trey Lance I think took enough of a step back that I think folks should be somewhat concerned about what his outlook is going to be for the 2022 season. Because while I think the market is still from a real football standpoint, it's entirely possible that Jimmy Garoppolo gets moved during the offseason. I've already seen some rumors about, let's say, Cleveland trying to acquire him in order to do some sort of bridge thing, something like that. In order for them to actually have a quarterback that, they can start to build around a bit more. from that perspective, considering they've already extended like both of their offensive linemen, and then they wind up having at least another stable, let's say, quarterback there. But I think the other part to really try and like wrap your head around, not just like with him, but would also be the other quarterbacks as well. I mean, so should you try and look at, I mean, like Zach Wilson's already taken a step back, but he was drafted a bit later. I mean, Najee Harris, I think he's been more of a function, or like the problem with him has really been more of a function of the entire offense and offensive line, and just Ben Roethlisberger's play has really made him take a step back. So I think most folks, like during the offseason, they'll be able to talk themselves into, well, his situation should continue to improve, and his situation should improve. The entire offense should improve, because they should be able to invest along that offensive line like most teams typically do in the offseason. So that shouldn't be much of an issue for him. I think with Jamar Chase, like him being essentially like the team's wide receiver one, whether you want to say he's the 1A or 1B to T. Higgins, all right, that's fine. But still, there's going to be enough for both of them in order to be like the Bengals' like primary passing options. So between those, I don't think Kyle Pitts has really done enough to separate his position relative to the other guys around him, because especially with the offseason narratives that most folks are going to talk themselves into. I mean, Jamar Chase already over 1,000 yards for his rookie season. Najee Harris has essentially been the primary running back like for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I don't think his situation, or at least the perception to his situation, is going to change over the offseason. Like nothing's really going to change like for them in order for Kyle Pitts to move past them. I think it's really just the question mark surrounding the quarterbacks that were taken ahead of him, especially Trey Lance. I think that's the only way that Kyle Pitts like moves ahead. Like he moves up in the rankings, at least relative to the rest of the people in his class. And I think that's about it. I mean, compared to the other guys that we were taken ahead of in rookie drafts.
Had to leave you hanging to go grab my charger real quick. So I guarantee that we were on the same page with everything, because when I came in, I heard the only question is Trey Lance. 100%, that's the same thing for me.
Yeah.
But you have to add in the fact that you might lose Trey Lance in front of him. However, you might add Mac Jones. You might add Javonte Williams, right?
True.
I mean, Mac Jones looks really, really good. Mac Jones looks like he probably should be ahead of Kyle Pitts in rookie drafts, Superflex rookie drafts. And Javonte's really close. Javonte is the discussion that we're going to have, because that's where it gets – okay, so I don't know if Trevor Lawrence is still my 101, but he's definitely 101 or 102.
Yeah.
Justin Fields is right there for me. Jamar Chase, I probably want Jamar Chase more than all of them, to be honest. Jamar Chase might be my 101 in this whole rookie class.
Mm-hmm.
And you have Najee Harris, of course. And then pre-draft, that's where I had either Trey Lance or Kyle Pitts. I think it's fair to move Kyle Pitts ahead of Trey Lance, because remember, it's not just, oh, well, we haven't seen Trey Lance. Well, we kind of did. We did get starts out of Trey Lance. We did get Trey Lance playing in some of the games.
Mm-hmm.
And while we know what he's going to be able to do in a Kyle Shanahan offense, and we know that he's very talented, you can't get past the fact that he didn't play a lot of football, period. So,
yeah.
I mean, we were enthralled by Kyle Shanahan and enthralled by the rushing ability, which is fantastic, but he still needs to play football. And Kyle Pitts' value is going to go way, way up before we get Trey Lance's value going up, because Trey Lance's value was already high, and he hasn't increased that value. So I'm fine scooting Trey Lance out of there and moving Pitts up a spot. But I'm also moving Mac Jones ahead of Pitts. So then Pitts stays at 106, and then you talk about Javonte Williams, because, well, I don't know that Javonte Williams, I don't even want to say hype. I mean, he's doing great, but I don't know if it's necessarily warranted that he's like a top 12 dynasty asset yet. Now, if you think about it for a second, Cam Akers was like the 112.
Sure.
And Cam Akers did just about as much as Javonte's done so far. So I guess it's kind of fair to put Javonte up quite that far, but is Kyle Pitts a top 12 dynasty asset? I don't believe so. Not even in tight end premium. I don't think Kyle Pitts is a top 12 dynasty asset. He's an amazing tight end. Probably fair that he's the tight end one overall, given that Kelsey's 33.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I put him in top 12 overall assets. I think you just push the whole tight end position down a little bit. So that means Javonte Williams probably ends up over Kyle Pitts as well. And now you're talking about Kyle Pitts at like the 108 in rookie superflex drafts, or the 107 in rookie superflex draft. So I think the answer was he wasn't worth the 104 or the 101 that some people gave for him. Now he might cost that, because he's Kyle Pitts and his value is going to be there for a really long time. And that's a conversation we can have. Does he have the staying power regardless of performance? Probably.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if I mentioned it before the show or before I had to dip out, but he hasn't got a lot of touchdowns, but those are going to come. So I don't want to hear people that are pointing at his 2021 season and saying, well, he only had one touchdown. Okay, he's not going to be never Julio. Like, he's going to score touchdowns. It's just going to be, there's going to be positive regression there. Hell, he might finish the season with 4 or 5 touchdowns. He might go on a spree and change the whole narrative. But we know he's going to crush Jigka's rookie receiving record. He'll probably get more touchdowns. So maybe his value goes up a little, but to me, it looks more like CEH, where his value was so high that whether he lived up to expectations or not, there's really just not much room. So unless Kyle Pitts is going to get into the top 12, then he probably gets behind Javonte, because Javonte hasn't even had a full workload and people are ready to draft him in the top 12, top 15. You don't see Kyle Pitts going quite that high yet, and he's Kyle Pitts, you know what I mean? So it's just the type of thing where it's like, Kyle Pitts is incredible. No one's disagreeing with that. Kyle Pitts is incredibly valuable. He's the tight end 1 in Dynasty. No one's disagreeing with that. But does he go ahead of Javonte? No, probably not. So now, reasonably speaking, he's probably like the 108.
Yeah, I think so. I think he probably fits somewhere in that range, and I think that's likely the problem with the tight end position as a whole.
Yep.
I mean, it's such a hard position to meaningfully separate like from the rest of the field. I mean, even with like even like in Travis Kelce's heyday, I mean, sure, he was starting to reach into like the top 10, the top 12, and like across all positions, but you really need to have that sort of not just success, but sustained success. Yeah, and we haven't seen that yet from Kyle Pitts. It's entirely possible that he gets there given the athlete that he is, but really that's what dynasty managers need, all right? We're not just looking at things from a week-to-week basis, but we're also trying to do this over multiple seasons. So unless Kyle Pitts like winds up having, let's say, sure, he winds up breaking Ditka's record this year, so that puts him on, that gives him a check mark or a feather in his cap for a single season, but he would need to really capitalize or far exceed what he's done this season next year to continue on that trend for him to even try and get close to the top 12 discussion. And 100%, yes, I mean, Javonte Williams probably does belong in the top 12 discussion overall, but as we were discussing, I mean, you can probably wind up being able to tear down like from him along with like, and the Kyle Pitts also falls into this discussion as well, and find like similar production elsewhere where folks have been able to get, I mean, at least reasonable production from guys like James Conner, so on and so forth. I mean, it's been like James Conner, Leonard Fournette. I mean, there's been like so many other guys that, I mean, probably don't even hold a candle to Javonte Williams from a value perspective, but the production has at least been there such that, yeah, I can get usable weeks out of all of those guys. So, I mean, heck, if you can wind up, I guess, finagling yourself into a deal where you might be able to get like some value in return for a couple of those guys, sure. I mean, I know a lot of folks that play a dynasty from that standpoint where it's just, I'd rather have younger wide receivers and older producing running backs because I can wind up capturing those RB2s with RB1 upside that can wind up, I guess, winning me my weeks once we get into the season, but I'm not investing a ton in them in order to really like wind up having a championship squad. So, I mean, for Javonte, yes, I 100% agree that like he probably is like should be a part of the top 12 discussion. Same thing with Kyle Pitts, just from their skill wise or from that standpoint. But after that, it's like once we get into the nitty gritty of how much they're going to actually produce on a weekly basis. I mean, heck, I mean, could you wind up having a Dallas Goedert for Kyle Pitts trade and see both of them wind up fairly close to, towards the end of the season in terms of statistical production? I think that's well within the range of outcomes.
Yeah, it depends what you get in addition to, but yeah.
I mean, and I think that's the discussion that you need to have.
Goddard could probably be the secondary piece in that trade. Actually, he definitely could be. You can get a solid dynasty asset plus Goddard for Kyle Pitts very easily. Nobody on Twitter is going to like you for it, but
No,
I think that
and
it
they'll
would
say
be
you lost the trade.
I think it would be a solid move in Dynasty. Before I brought in the Javonte Williams discussion, I just want to make sure everybody's aware of the YouTube shows that we have here at Football Guys. So it's not just us. If you're tuning in for the Dynasty Newsletter, we appreciate y'all for being here. But if you subscribe to the Football Guys channel, you'll get on Wednesday, you'll get the mailbag show. Dave, Troy, and Victoria go over start sits for the week. Any questions that you have before you get into these critical weeks. You can go over there to the mailbag show, submit your questions, and they'll help you out, especially going into these playoffs. And then we also have a Dynasty show. So we have Jordan McNamara, Chad Parsons doing their Dynasty thing. Plus, we have DFS Power Hour that everybody should tune into, the Power Grid, sorry. So we have a lot of content over there. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a video. Now, to talk about Javonte Williams, if you have Javonte Williams on your roster, you probably want to hold him until you see full production. However, if you can get top 12 value for Javonte before he sees full production, you almost should probably take that because he never needs to see full production for you to get top 12 value. I mean, it's like sad. Like, it would be sad to see him go. Like, you'd have to shed a tear, pour one out for Javonte if you had him on your roster and you traded him away. But technically, it would be the right thing to do at that point in time if you're getting top 12 value for him. The only question would be, I'll pull it up in a second because I have a good example of this. The only question would be, well, where can he go up from here? Well, if you look at the rankings, not very far. I mean, he's not going to ever take over Jonathan Taylor's spot, in my opinion.
No.
He's going to have DeAndre Swift to compete with. So
maybe Gibson, maybe.
I mean, he's going to have those guys to compete, that younger tier of like Swift, Gibson, etc., to compete with. But then he also has to pile drive his way past CMC, Kamara, Chubb, etc. So it's going to be hard for him to get past this spot. Like, if he's already being drafted in the top 12, top 15, it's going to be hard for him to get past there. So I was just going to show what we have here and just look at some of these guys. Like, where could Javonte Williams go up, and should you trade him because he can't go up? So these rankings are probably a little bit, I wouldn't say outdated, but it's only 3 of our rankers. So the ADP is going to be a little bit more representative. And Javonte Williams was going in this month's mocks, close to the first round. So now we have to look at some of these running backs. Well, can he push past some of these guys? Can he push past Jonathan Taylor? I do not believe so. Can he push past Najee Harris? I do not believe so. Then you get to the tier of Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook. Now you get to somewhere where me and you can have a conversation about it, because I do think that he can push past those guys soon enough to make it worth it. So, and Kamara just had a big day, which feeds into this discussion with the Dynasty news. So do you feel like it's time for Javonte to be ahead of Kamara, CMC, and Cook, that draft class?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, looking at his rushing success rate, I charted that over the last at least over the entire season. While it has been lower than Melvin Gordon's, it's been enough such that he's been useful as a running back. And then also in the 1 week that he was the lone guy against Kansas City, 52% success rate, also been more efficient as a receiver than Melvin Gordon. So he really is the dual package. So if he already has that workload, or at least the flashes of that workload, obviously, since we're talking about sustained success earlier, Kamara has the better track record. CMC obviously has the better track record, but given injuries have now kind of derailed the seasons for at least CMC, and Javonte Williams is looking like he's at the very least going to be the guy coming into Denver next season. Yeah, I think Javonte is probably he should be valued ahead of those guys. But I think the real conversation is when you get to maybe some of the guys that might not be as old, or or maybe a similar class as CMC. Let's say maybe Joe Mixon, somewhere around there. I could say I would probably put Javonte ahead of those guys, but it's still, I think, similar tier enough that if you were to I would value them fairly similarly, just because Javonte already has the hype growing, but Mixon in his own right has been the guy to produce fairly similarly over the past couple of seasons. So I think for the most part, considering we have Javonte, where is he at right now?
This is
So,
overall, and he's
so
all the way at the bottom here at 21 currently in the Football Guys rankings.
yeah, I'd probably move him like well into like the high teens or probably close to the top 12 as of right now.
Which is fair, and that's with him not ever having a full workload because he's been so productive on not a full workload. So that's why we're
Yeah,
trying to answer the question. Well, if he can be in the top 15 with half the workload, then can
sure.
he be top 3, top 4? But
Right.
and that's what you would need to still buy Javonte. And I think just a few weeks ago, before Javonte went on the spree, we were like, yeah, definitely a time to buy Javonte. And you see how quick the dynasty tables turn. It's like, I'm looking at this wanting to buy Javonte and I'm seeing him at like 15. I'm like, yeah, it's probably fair that he's there. But then you look and he's kind of like at a stopping point, like a plateau point, because there's a
Mhm.
lot of players blocking him. When you get the wide receivers involved, Justin Jefferson not moving, CeeDee Lamb not moving,
Mhm.
Jamar Chase not moving, Najee Harris not moving, Jonathan Taylor not moving.
Yeah.
So even if he hits 8, you've gained 4 spots in value maybe, and you
Right.
probably had to overpay at this point in time just because of name value. So you're
Yeah.
probably paying top 8, top 10 prices anyways. Now it's hard to buy Javonte. Now it seems like, yeah, like I started this conversation, you probably trade him and you pour one out for him because it's very sad to see him go. But man, top 15 already, you probably just have to exploit that market, I'd say.
Yeah, easily, because look at some of the guys that were ahead of him. I mean, DK Metcalf, take him over DK Metcalf. I mean, who else is there? Austin Eckler, take him over Austin Eckler.
Hmm.
Steph Diggs, Zeke Elliott. And yeah, I mean, most of those guys, I mean, those are 5, 6 guys I can rattle off like right now. CMC, I mean, I'd probably take like 5, 6 of those guys right there, shift him up into at least the high teens. I mean, Nick Chubb, yeah, I'd probably take him over Nick Chubb at this point too, given the workload. I mean, the dual threat, like a possibility for Javonte, I think
Hmm.
puts him over Nick Chubb as well. So it's like 6, 7 guys you can probably put him ahead at this point. So I think you can probably like safely put him like at the, if you're not putting him in the top 12, he's really close. He should be a fringe top 12 guy. So there's a lot of value I think you could see him moving ahead of in order to recoup for a guy like him.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, he can definitely gain a little bit of value, but it's just there's 6 that I don't see moving in
Yeah,
Javante's career. I don't see him moving over Taylor, Chase, Harris, Jefferson, or Lamb
sure.
ever. So even if Javonte does get the full workload and looks fantastic next year, you get the top 6 overall. So then you profited because there's a huge value difference between the 12th overall player and the 7th overall player. And then
Yeah.
that's fair. Then maybe you should have still bought Javonte. But there's a wide range of outcomes where he doesn't play perfect, which is what he would have to do just to get to 7th overall. And then you don't profit on the investment. So that's why I think that you end up just selling Javonte pretty soon if he ends up being in the top 12. Not because he's not great, not because he's not going to have a fantastic career, just because there's not a lot of room for him at the top. There's also young guys that are still contributing at a very, very high level on better offenses because Javonte can't change the fact that he's on the Broncos, right? And they have great rushing success rate right now. But you still need a productive offense, and you don't know if you're going to have Teddy Bridgewater going forward. You don't know if you want Teddy Bridgewater going forward. You don't know if you want Vic Fangio going forward because if you ask Cecil Lammey, you do not want Vic Fangio going forward, right? So these are things that Javonte can't control. So I know we're all excited about Javonte right now, and we should be, but you can't pay top 12 price for him right now and expect to get that much more for him, maybe ever.
That's fair. My only pushback would be that you laid out the case for Javonte needing to play better or at least play perfect in order to move up. I would say that that's partially true. I mean, at that same like along that same vein, it could be that the rest of the guys ahead of him don't play well. I mean, what are the chances that CMC, even if he does come back, he comes back and plays back at the 2019 level? He's already tried
Yeah,
that twice and it hasn't worked out. DK
fair.
Metcalf, assuming if Russ Wilson doesn't come back next season, he winds up going to the Broncos, which has been a rumor that's been discussed,
Hmm.
then what does his outlook look like? I mean, so there's a chance that Javonte plays, let's say, well, not perfect, but well, and then the rest of the guys fail ahead of him. But then on top of that, look at the incoming running back class. I mean, who are the younger guys that are coming in this coming off season that even have a chance to try and at least push him for value at the bottom end? what we're hearing out of this running back that's coming in, very, very top heavy. I mean, maybe 1 to 2 prospects that might have a shot at getting into the first couple of rounds, but nobody, at least from what I've heard, have the similar skill set to what Javonte has, like going over some of the prospects that are coming out this season. So I think there's at least some optimism that he should be able to retain at least the value that he's currently at while also moving forward, given the fact that, I mean, we do obviously project for him to have a much stronger workload moving forward, even if his situation like doesn't necessarily improve. At least given what he's done so far, I mean, we'll probably continue to talk ourselves throughout the offseason, all sorts of positive things for Javonte. So his perceived value will probably wind up going up, like the same thing we were discussing about with Pitts. I mean, his perceived value will probably continue to go up, like during the offseason. I mean, the only ways that Pitts or Javonte Williams, if they're for their perceived value to drop over the offseason, is if, let's say, they wind up with another bridge quarterback and their coaching staff is completely overhauled to, let's say, even like actually to be quite honest, even a conservative coaching staff like winds up working for him. So it's
I mean, that's kind of working now, to be honest.
So I mean,
that's why Melvin and him are both successful.
So really, the only thing that could really go wrong for him is if they wind up going the route of getting another, let's say, like Trevor Siemian or something like that, which won't happen since Denver already knows who Siemian is. But you see what I'm saying, like in terms of getting like a backup quarterback to roll them through the 2022 season. So it's like, yeah, I can see him like moving forward, at least being increasing his value without having to do much, just because of the tenuous situations of the guys that we have currently ranked ahead of him at Football Guys.
Yeah, fair point. So we wanted to focus on the 2 big conversations with Kyle Pitts, Javonte Williams, mixed in some of the veteran running backs, and just saying like, hey, is it time to move some of these veterans for Javonte? And are you taking too big of a risk by doing so? So that's going to do it for us today. We appreciate you all for coming out. We will start getting you some of the incoming rookie content here soon. So we appreciate you all listening along, and we will catch you next time.
Peace.